What is going on, everybody? Travis Fowler Harkrider is back again this week with another edition of Tights and Turnbuckles. So, you know what time it is. Let's talk pro wrestling and let's get right into our weekly review of what the highlights were for each show going into this weekend. And we'll also do some AEW Full Gear predictions, which is actually happening as we speak. I am not watching the pay-per-view tonight. And I'll go into the reasons why in just a little bit. But again, jumping straight into our weekly recap. So, over on Raw, we saw Rhea Ripley announced as the final person on her women's Survivor Series War Games team. And honestly, I don't have a problem with the way those teams have meshed out. And Rhea was a surprise addition. I'm actually really shocked that she was able to come back. I know she's wearing the facial protection gear to help her with that broken orbital socket. But overall, I'm still really impressed that she's actually able to still come and do some in-ring action while she heals from actually a pretty severe injury. But at the same time, we've seen in the past with people with broken noses do the same thing. And hell, even Undertaker himself back in the early 90s, I believe it was during 1994, where he had his orbital bone fractured. He wore that kind of Phantom of the Opera style mask, which I really think suited his gimmick back then, and I kind of wish they would have stuck with that with him for a little bit longer. But I digress. Back to current times. Everybody has been actually raving over the Miz and Karrion Kross promo that was done this past week. And I gotta say, while I agree that the pairing is actually, I think, going to be much better than what I even anticipated, because I'm thinking Miz with Final Testament was just a really off combination. Still kind of feel that way, but they could change my mind. Again, their promo this past week was actually very well done. So I'm interested to see what goes next for this, but also the response from the Wyatt Six, specifically the video from Bo Dallas. Man, a lot of people said it, and it is so true when you look at it. He looked so much like Bray Wyatt there, his brother, that I actually thought it was Bray a few times when they were doing the cutscenes back and forth. And until he started actually speaking, I didn't know that that was Bo. Again, I thought it was maybe another cutscene from a previous promo that Wyatt had done back in the past. But man, I know they're brothers, so I know the whole, like, well, duh, of course they're going to look similar. But when I say it was eerily close to looking just like Bray, it was just spot on. And so many people felt the same way this past week. He's doing great work too. The response from the Wyatt Six, you know that this feud between them and the Final Testament is just about to pop off at any second. And I think it's going to be great. I think it's good for both teams. They both have that kind of mysterious aura to them, and I think it just plays off well against each other. So I look forward to seeing how this all wraps up between this faction warfare. And we saw Solo Sikoa coming to help out his recently announced 5th team member on his Bloodline team for Survivor Series War Games, being Bronson Reed, who, as we talked about last week, is of himself of Samoan descent, but he's also from European descent as well. So I love that he actually kind of fits right in with the group, and even when we get to SmackDown and you see all 5 of them together, he really does still kind of fit right in with the Bloodline. So even if they made him a permanent addition, I don't think very many people would complain about it. I know I wouldn't. Again, he fits the aesthetic and the mold for the Bloodline as it is. He picking up a big win over Rollins thanks to Solo Sikoa just adds more credence to the Survivor Series situation. And many people expected Seth Rollins to be announced as that 5th member coming up on SmackDown. And I had my own theories, as I talked about last week. And man, were they validated when SmackDown occurred just last night. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. Moving over to NXT, we saw three people qualify for their Iron Survivor matches, respectively. That being Nathan Fraser for the guys, and then the two women's to qualify into the Iron Survivor match for the women's side, being Stephanie Vaquer and Zarya, who both are super impressive in NXT recently. So I can't wait to see how the Iron Survivor challenges all wrap up. I actually enjoy this gimmick. We talked about it about a week or so ago, or it could have even been on the week prior to last week's episode. But I really do think since the Elimination Chamber, I'd have to say the Iron Survivor has become one of my favorite stipulations that's been introduced. I love the 25-minute concept. The penalty box, I was still kind of off on. I wasn't really digging that idea just because I wasn't a fan of that with the King of the Mountain match, but let's be fair, I'm not a fan of the King of the Mountain match in TNA anyway. But I just had that too much of a vibe, and yet somehow, some way, it has actually worked, and it works great with that whole stipulation. I mean, the comeback that we saw last year from Trick Williams, again, I've mentioned it here before, it was so well done, and that whole stipulation of the penalty box actually came into a great practice for that spot to occur. And yeah, overall, the match has grown on me. I honestly believe the very first match that was ever done with that stipulation involving the women's NXT division was spectacular. Go back and rewatch it if you haven't. It is amazing to see. Also, the men's version of it was just as good, and they've just gotten better and better over these last 2 years, so I do expect that year 3 is going to be no different, especially once they get all of the competitors round up. It's going to be quite a stacked lineup for at least the women's side. I'm interested to see what they do for the men's Iron Survivor Challenge as well. But two things of notoriety took place. One, Fallon Henley of Fatal Influence had a open challenge that would be answered almost by the entire women's roster, but we know only one woman can get that title shot. And as the women were busy brawling with each other in a similar fashion, like Vic Joseph said, to the weeks prior of the tag teams going at each other's throats, someone decided to take advantage of it, and it's a woman that I believe is very underrated, but she is going to be a major player, especially when she gets on the main roster. Tatum Paxley. I think her gimmick is solid. She is fully into it. Her in-ring work has only improved over the last year or so since we first saw her, and I think the whole Ivy Nile team was just really weird back in the 2.0 days, and since becoming a solo act, she has really come into her own with this creepy goth girl gimmick, and I do expect big things from her, again, especially when she makes the main roster. That gimmick, I believe, is going to flourish spectacularly. Then Chase U is also done over in NXT. It's an end of an era. Ridge Holland is now the number one contender for the NXT title. And Chase U has been a gimmick that's been around, I believe, since the 2.0 days started. So now to see that come to its full circle end, I look forward to seeing what they end up doing with the members. Andre Chase is a great worker. Duke Hudson, I believe, really found himself within that gimmick of MVP for Chase U. And then Riley Osborne and Thea Hale, they'll be just fine. They're young enough that they're still going to find their footing, and it's not going to be that big of a deal transition-wise for the two of them. Now, get over to SmackDown. While we had the final 5 selected for the team Ripley, if you will, over at Survivor Series War Games for the women's side, they are now down a member as Jade Cargill was taken out by a mysterious attacker. And they provided an update today that she had a list of injuries that it looks like is going to keep her out, quote, indefinitely. We'll see how long indefinitely ends up being. But two things to note about that before we go into some speculations on who that 5th and final member is going to end up being. If you noticed at the end of that segment, when it came to the match that Bianca Belair left for, Naomi had a little bit of a side eye as Bayley hugged her. So Are they telling us that maybe Naomi had something to do with it? Was it somebody else? Maybe that returning star to fill the spot was the person who done it. We'll find out soon enough. But a lot of people are speculating that that fifth and final spot could end up being a returning Charlotte Flair. I have recently seen her do some activity on social media that looks like it's hyping up for her return, so it very well could be her. I will also say, though, it would not surprise me in the slightest if that fifth and final spot ends up going to a returning Becky Lynch. I believe we could have one or the other take place at Survivor Series next Saturday, War Games. I'm actually going to take my theory and run with it and say Becky Lynch will be the fifth person to fill that final spot for War Games next Saturday. Now, Chelsea Green finally is getting her coups as she is now qualified to move on in the United States Championship Tournament for the women's side. Very much well deserved. I think many people, including myself, really think Chelsea should be the one to become the inaugural women's U.S. champion. I'm going to go with her on this one. If it wasn't her, I was wanting Mi Chen, and I think Mi Chen is going to be somebody that hangs around that title picture once that's established. B-Fab is somebody to also keep an eye on, and it's reported that she has impressed a lot of people with her work ethic and her initiative to get better, so awesome on her. I think she's going to be a big player in the very near future. But yeah, I'm taking Chelsea Green to become your first U.S. Women's Champion. So mark my words, many others want it too. Green for U.S. title. Then we saw Cody Rhodes and Kevin Owens finally have a war of words with each other, and it's hard not to be on Kevin's side in this. Like, even though he's the heel because of the dastardly actions of taking out Orton and even the attack to Cody to start things, but he's pretty validated in his thoughts, which what's making him the best heel running is that a heel who's right but is obnoxious about it or violent when he doesn't have to be is the best heel. It's the best legit heel that you can be, and he's falling right in with that. Him and Cody are going to put on a spectacular match. Most are speculating that that'll be for Saturday night's main event in December, and I do concur with that, and it'll be a great matchup between the two. Very much looking forward to that. The tag title scene is also heating up over on SmackDown with the Motor City Machine Guns being the champions. They were trying to determine number one contenders last week, or actually they were in a tag title match were the Street Profits and MCMG. That was interrupted by Tommaso Ciampa and led to the match last night of Tommaso Ciampa and Montez Ford. And man, I gotta say, I think they're starting to put more focus on that tag division, but it worries me how much longer DIY is going to be a team. I really do want them to turn Johnny with Tommaso so that way we can continue this tag title feud that's seemingly going on where you've got the Street Profits, MCMG, and DIY, almost like a reinvigoration of the original TLC crew from 2000s with the Hardys, the Dudleys, and ENC. Maybe this could be their way to revitalize the tag title scene with those three teams on SmackDown. I certainly would be for it, and I think several others would be as well. So only time will tell, but I have got my fingers crossed and am very optimistic for that. Please give us a DIY heel run. Then we come to the Bloodline segment to end the show. Who was the fifth member? Well, a returning Paul Heyman. He announced that his best friend, CM Punk, the original Paul Heyman guy, is going to round out as member number 5 for the OG Bloodline. And for those that tuned in last week to hear my theory about who the fifth member would be, I hate saying it. No, wait a minute. I don't. I told you that CM Punk could be that fifth member, and sure enough, it falls right in with that theory, and it does not surprise me if Seth Rollins gets upset about this. I'm also calling an interference spot during the men's War Games match next Saturday. But something I want to mention that a lot of people have talked about is the devil being in the details. Two things to talk about. One, during the off-camera, or I should say after show spot that was later posted on WWE's social media websites, you saw a little nod and wink from Paul Heyman to Jimmy Uso. Does that mean anything? My guess is probably not, but something that is of note is Paul Heyman's attire. Now, he was used to doing suits with the Bloodline. Specifically, it was like a blue suit with white stripes, and then he'd have a red tie with a red handkerchief out. But last night, Paul Heyman was decked out in a suit, but in a different variation. It was black jacket, black pants with a red shirt, just a shirt, not even a button-up, no tie, and a red handkerchief. Very similar to what Solo Sikoa was sporting when he first debuted as the new tribal chief for the Bloodline. That has led many to speculate, is Heyman potentially going to turn on the OGs next week? I'm thinking yes, because as I had a conversation with some friends just today, I can see Paul Heyman being now a wise man for Solo Sikoa at the orders of the High Chief, The Rock. That is what I think we could see very much take place. So only time will tell if that ends up becoming true, but it will not surprise me again if we see a Rollins interference spot in War Games, which can lead towards CM Punk and his feud down the road, but Bronson Reed would be the main target there. And then Paul Heyman turning on the OGs. I'm just saying it. I think a lot of people could see it coming. I think a lot of people are speculating it's going to happen. So I'm taking it as it's going to take place next week. It'll be heartbreaking to see, but I think it could and very much will happen. Over on the AEW side, the reason I wanted to save AEW for now is not just to talk about Full Gear, but honestly, the Dynamite show overall just did not really hit for me. Like, the Roderick Strong MJF match coming up, or at least I should say maybe it's already happened tonight, but anyway, taking place at Full Gear, really just wasn't anything I was looking forward to. And the whole promo battle between the two of them where MJF was talking about how you're going to wish that your parents had killed you instead. Okay, whatever. Like, that's a very serious topic, and obviously Roderick Strong's cool bringing it up on wrestling programming, but I don't know. I just don't think it's necessary to bring that into this fold, but that's just my opinion and my opinion only. We saw Lashley debut in a very dominant fashion, and that's just leading towards his match with Swerve Strickland tonight. That's about all I got for that. Jericho and Ishii doing their contract signing for the Ring of Honor World Title match. I gotta admit, it was actually entertaining to watch as Jericho was trying to walk away and Ishii was just slowly following behind him. That was actually pretty funny, so I give it to them on that. Daniel Garcia kidnapping Jack Perry. I get that DG is supposed to be the face in this, but I gotta say, doing this promo the way they did it really makes him look like the heel in this. And it's hard to root for somebody that wants to go to that length when really Jack Perry hasn't done anything to Daniel Garcia, in my opinion, to warrant that kind of response from Garcia. But I don't know. That feud's not really hitting it for me. That's part of my problem with this Full Gear card. And we'll talk more about it in just a moment, but I can't speak for everybody else. But once again, for the second straight pay-per-view on AEW programming, I really am just not really in or looking forward to the pay-per-view that is coming up. And it's Full Gear's kind of the same situation now. We'll get more in depth in just a moment. Don Callis' family picked up a win in a huge all-star 8-man tag to start the show. And then Orange Cassidy took on Wheeler Yuta, one of his former friends, and now current member of the Death Riders with Yuta. And that saw Moxley come up and duct tape Orange Cassidy together while they beat him up. It's just whatever to end the show. Mercedes Moné had her spot where she was once again demeaning Camille and telling her to do the dirty work against Chris Statlander before their match tonight. And I cannot speak for this enough. I hate that they've done this to Camille already. Like, the pair hasn't even really been a pair for what, 6 months? I don't even think we've hit that mark yet. And they've already started going down the route of Monet just badgering on Camille. Like, they're already setting up for her to turn on Camille or Camille to turn on her rather quickly. And that's not what you should be doing right now. Camille should have been made to be a very intimidating powerhouse. And now they've just whittled her down to really nothing. She's of nothing to worry at all. I don't see her as a threat for Mercedes Moné or anybody for that matter. And that's sad because she was built like a powerhouse. Matter of fact, I believe she was called the powerhouse over in NWA. Doing that in AEW could have been an easy transition, but this is what we've got. And I'm not a fan of it. I think a lot of people also aren't a fan of it, but obviously it's what they want to do, and she's cool with it. Mercedes is doing it, and that's what AEW Creative has. So this is what we get. Not a fan, but it is what it is. And overall, I have to say, Mercedes Moné just in general has not really hit for me in AEW. I can't exactly nail what it is that is just off for me, but I was a huge fan of hers in WWE with the Sasha Banks moniker. Just unfortunately, the Monet thing just hasn't clicked. I don't know exactly what could be causing the difference, but whether it's her trying to do like face stuff by rooting for the city that she's in, it's not a thing by being like, say hello to your CEO each time. The cringeworthy music that has CEO at the beginning of it is just god awful. But overall, she's a great worker, great wrestler. Just something's off. I don't know what. I don't know how they can fix it, if it can be fixed. I certainly wish that she would have stuck with WWE just because I think that aura of her would still be there, and something's just diminished over here in AEW. Again, I may be part of a minority in thinking that, but at least the people that I talk to closely about this subject feel the same way that I do when it pertains to Monet. But let's go ahead and get into our Full Gear predictions real quick. It won't take too long because, like I said, I'm not really looking forward to any of this card, with the exception of maybe 2 matches, which I will identify both those as we go. First off, the Champagne Championship celebration with Mariah May and Mira Shakira. I may have even pronounced her name wrong there, so if I did, I'm sorry. But I do enjoy her work, and it's going to take me a minute just to get the name correct if I mispronounced it. Why they're doing this celebration way after she won the title makes no sense to me. It's a waste of Mariah May, in my opinion, as I believe she can be a future tadpole for the women's division. I really do believe that is somebody you can book your women's division behind. Then you got MJF and Roderick Strong. MJF, I think, is kind of an obvious pick. So, MJF to beat Roddy Strong. Not really giving a care about that match. Jay White and Hangman Page. I know this is kind of a continuation of their feud, but I think in this case, I'm going to say that Hangman would need the win more, so I'm taking Hangman Page. Will Ospreay versus Kyle Fletcher. This is one of those matches that I actually am looking forward to. As I have expressed, I've become a fan of Will Ospreay's very much, and I think he's done great work for what AEW is supposed to do. He does it and then some. I want to say he's going to beat Kyle, but I could see them giving this to Fletcher too, especially since Ospreay has been very company oriented by not being like a big time star that tries to play the power card all the time. So I think I'm going to take Kyle Fletcher in this to pull up what would be an upset over Will Ospreay. So yeah, Kyle Fletcher to defeat Ospreay tonight at Full Gear. In the 4-way for the AEW tag titles, as much as I've enjoyed the Outrunners, I still think their time is not quite now, but I am going to go with the representatives of the House of Black. This is a purely fan pick of mine. Kings of the Black Throne, I'm going to take to win that 4-way and the AEW tag team titles. Then you move to the AEW International Championship. Should be a fun match. It's not one that I really care for too much. Konosuke Takeshita taking on Ricochet. I'd take Takeshita retaining over Ricochet as much as I would enjoy him getting a title. I just don't think they're going to take it off of Takeshita this quickly. So I'm giving it to Konosuke in this one. TNT title, Jack Perry, Daniel Garcia. Jack Perry picking up the win. I'm going to guess by some chicaneries. But yeah, Perry over Garcia in this match. Then the TBS title, I'm not wasting time on this one. Mercedes Moné is going to retain over Chris Statlander. Then we get to the second match that I'm looking forward to because I can't wait to see the contrast in styles. Swerve Strickland and Bobby Lashley is going to be a lot of fun to watch. So Bobby Lashley now being away from the WWE banner, if you didn't see his work in Impact when he was there for a good stint, he can do so many great things, and I think him and Swerve are going to pull out a sleeper hit for this Full Gear pay-per-view. Then you move to Jon Moxley and Orange Cassidy in the main event for the AEW title. Yeah, I think on this one, it's pretty much going to be an easy pick. They're not taking that belt off Moxley right now. Jon Moxley over Orange Cassidy and retaining the AEW championship at Full Gear. Guys, that's all I got for you this week. I hope you've enjoyed this show. What are your predictions for the upcoming War Games pay-per-view? Sound off in those comments down below. Let me know if you enjoyed AEW's Full Gear pay-per-view this past weekend. And let me know of anything else you want to talk about. I love talking wrestling and everything that has to do with it in those comments with every single one of you. Make sure you're following us on our social media pages. Subscribe to this YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok. I will come back again next week to talk more professional wrestling with everyone. But until that time, have a safe week and a happy Thanksgiving with your loved ones, and continue to love pro wrestling.